and the wind is the female. And we as women have to embark upon a campaign to promote a balance. The linear age of man is over. And we represent the circle. And we are being given signs by Tate, the wind, of climate change. She is the circle in the tornado, in the hurricane. She is the eye of the hurricane. And we must listen. And we must know that we are given the signs. That's the spiritual relationship that we have with the universe. We are a universal people. We are a pluralistic society, which encompasses all. So we have an obligation to Mother Earth. And I can never say enough, as many times, that she is tilting and we can't put her back. So our time is measured, and you and I don't know if it's 20 years, if it's 40 years, or if it's another millennium, but we have an obligation to protect Mother Earth. And we need to save her water for her life-giving so that she in turn can give life. Human survival depends on that gesture. So we're seeking justice in this land. If we don't receive it here, we have petitioned the United Nations Committee to Eliminate Racial Discrimination by Bismarck, North Dakota being the original route and putting it 4 miles because it was going to taint their water. They put it 40 miles south to our homeland. And I don't know why, by what miracle it would be safe for us. So we have filed racial discrimination charges, and that will be heard in November. We are going to the World Court. We are going to the Organization of American States. We are issuing treaty IDs. We are issuing treaty permits for all of the non-Indian people who are come to us. And we are getting to driver's licenses and hunting licenses. So at some point, we know that America has to secede from our territory. So I want to thank you. We're asking that you join us in our struggle for justice. I've been overwhelmed by the 9,000 people who have come to our homeland to support us from all over the world, from America. I'm so blessed, I believe, to witness this historic happening in my homeland. And I want to say thank you to all of those of you who are supporting us. America is changing rapidly, and we don't know what course America is going to take, but we have to create security for our people in our homeland. We have a land base, we have a language, we have all of the makeup to be a nation. And so we're going to the international community, those fora, and no one's going to tell us otherwise. I have an obligation to my grandchildren, at least to leave a footprint of what can be done, what we did to validate our actions, to verify to them that we fought as hard as we could in a peaceful and prayerful manner to preserve our homeland and our people and for them. So we continue our struggle. It's about humanity. It's not about just my grandchildren, it's about your grandchildren too. We fought for this country. I was raised on VA pension. And I had uncles that were heroes in Normandy. And my uncle was the only Indian recipient of the Silver Parachute of the 7 Americans who received that honor for their struggle against the enemy in Normandy. So I was a good American for 40 years, and I had to change course and be a good Lakota and Lakota for the last 30. So Lila Wopila, thank you for listening to us and hearing us and supporting us.
Our third speaker is Kevin Hancock. He comes to us from Maine. If you haven't heard the stirrings of a call to justice, how difficult a call to liberation can be, it's coming. And Kevin comes to us as an example of how to do it, how to hear the sacred, and how to follow with courage that voice. Kevin Hancock.
Good evening. Hello. I want to just start by saying a big heartfelt thank you. It's been a wonderful 2.5 days here in this community. Just wonderful. It's been an honor. It's been fun. And it's been filled with listening, learning, thinking, and sharing. Things that in a 24/7 internet-wired go, bigger, better, more world can so easily get lost. So this has been a blessing for me. And I want to thank Eric for finding me. And then I particularly want to thank Tink and Phyllis. It's just been a blessing to spend 2 days with you. And the way you've welcomed me into this conversation and treated me with so much respect and love. Thank you. I appreciate that. So my story, as it pertains to the book and tonight, starts here. Starts this way. It was the day before Halloween, actually, October 2012, and a guy from a 6th-generation lumber company in Maine, found myself standing alone at the Wounded Knee Massacre site on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in the southwest corner of South Dakota. Sometime later, a well-worn car, a res car, pulled up, and an old jewelry maker rolled down her window and with the warmest of smiles said, "What brings you here?" And I reciprocated the smile and extended my hand and leaned in and said, "That is a great question." It was such a great question that it would take me 2 more years and 6 more trips to Pine Ridge before I could answer it. All I knew at the time was that I was searching something universally human. I was searching for my voice on a literal and spiritual level, ironically yet powerfully, in a community where nobody felt heard. And this, I've worn this every day since. This is the necklace I purchased from that jewelry maker. So back home in Maine, in 2010, at the peak of the housing and mortgage market collapse, trying to help lead a lumber company, I began to have trouble speaking. When I went to talk, all the muscles in my throat would spasm and squeeze and contract, and my voice got very, very broken and weak and often impossible to hear. And worse yet, for me, it felt like it took a major athletic feat to push out just a few short sentences. And talking left me sore, dizzy, out of breath, and not wanting to say very much. So I was really thrown off. How in the world would I help lead a lumber company through a housing crisis without being able to talk? And I really had no idea what to do, but my instincts took over, and it got real simple. When you can't always talk, you listen. I got really, really good initially as a defense mechanism at listening. I got really good at asking questions, answering a question with a question, sharing a stage I used to spend all my time on, and ultimately inviting everyone around me to lead. So people would come to me with a problem, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to give a long explanation as to the answer. So they'd come to me with a question and I would start saying defensively, that's a great question. What do you think we should do? And guess what I found when I started asking that question and listening? People knew. They had great answers. And I would simply say, that's a great idea, let's do that. And in time, that idea of shared leadership took over and infected and changed our whole company in a really wonderful way. In 2012, when the economy had stabilized, I picked up a copy. I was still searching for my voice on a couple levels, and I picked up a copy of National Geographic, August of 2012, and the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation was on the cover. There was a picture of a young Lakota boy, bareback, with a ponytail, riding a horse over a rolling plain. And the cover read something like, "In the spirit of Crazy Horse, the rebirth of a Sioux Nation." And I read that article, and it was as if every spirit, past or present, ever connected to that story came out of that yellow magazine and hugged me and pulled me in. I've never had that feeling before or since, but I had that feeling in such a deep way that I felt no need to even explain it. You know that feeling? And I leaned over to my wife and I said, I'm going to go there. I want to see what modern day life is like for the people that live there. And 3 months later, I was talking to the wonderful jewelry maker at the Wounded Knee Massacre site. What was going to be one trip turned into two turned into 3, 4, 5. I was just there for the 10th time. A journal I was keeping turned into a book, and none of this had anything to do with my job description or the roles that people would have expected of me. My only qualification to going to Pine Ridge was a really powerful one. I was human. And the people that lived there were human. And I had no role or responsibility or right beyond that simple but powerful thing. And I've since made many, many friends there. It's one of my favorite places in the world, and some of my favorite people in the world live there. And I've come to believe, having spent a good deal of time there now, that engagement and connectivity in and of itself is a powerful act. Engagement and connectivity in and of itself can be a really powerful act. Being with, listening, being connected to. And it all made me rethink. It all made me rethink, stop and think about the nature of time. Events that I thought were ancient history were not over for this community I was spending time with. I thought the winning of the West was ancient history, but it still lived for this community. I thought Columbus's quote-unquote discovery was ancient history, but even that still lived for this communities and other communities like it. It all made me rethink the nature of leadership, the combination of losing my voice, which I've since come to believe all organizational leaders should do once in a while. Losing my voice and learning about the Lakota old ways of community and shared power and shared responsibility made me think differently about leadership, and I came to see it all as a blessing. And I also had a little bit of a background in astrology, and so I knew that mankind was on a cusp. And one thing that's really been interesting to me in the last 2 days is both Phyllis and Tink in their own ways have said as much, that we are in a period of change. The Piscean age has ended, the Aquarian age has dawned, and it made me think a lot about how leadership needed to change. What did leadership need to look like in the Aquarian age? The Piscean age was a leadership time of a single authoritarian superior leader. The head of the household spoke for the house. The head of the church spoke for the churchgoers. The head of the government spoke for the country, the head of the empire, the head of the corporation. But to me, what you see when you look around the world today is increasingly souls are no longer good with that. And this is a really exciting time. In the Aquarian age, every individual wants to know, seek, know, and speak their own truth. And what really gave me goosebumps was that as I spent time at Pine Ridge and learned about the old ways of the Sioux, this was wisdom that their tribes had had for generations long ago, that nobody spoke for everyone, that everyone was expected to know their own truth, to speak their own truth. And if every individual in the tribe was strong, then the tribe would be strong. It was right out of Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book to me. The strength of the pack was the wolf. So it changed the way I thought about so many things, including finally tribalism, the idea of tribalism itself. And I thought, what will tribalism look like in the Aquarian Age? How do we strike a balance where every tradition, every group can know and celebrate proudly the essence of who they are, and, not or, but and, we can also share and celebrate a single global humanity. Because I don't think the world will find balance with one or the other. It's got to be both. It's got to be both, or so I came to see. I'd like to just kind of wrap up quickly by honoring 4 friends of mine, 4 close friends of mine. I came to learn at Pine Ridge that the number 4 is sacred. And now I look for the number 4 everywhere I go in my life. 4 directions, 4 seasons, 4 stages of life. So I just wanted to share with you a couple of short passages. This one is from my dear friend Catherine Grayday, who's an elder at Pine Ridge, is actually Dakota from Standing Rock, but lived at Pine Ridge while I was there. So I was having dinner with her one night. And after dinner we were visiting, and Catherine continued speaking, and in doing so she referenced the phrase internalized oppression. What do you mean by internalized oppression? I asked Catherine. It's just about being worn down, generation after generation, the cavalry, the missionaries, the government, the boarding schools. You wake up one day and it's all been internalized. When you've been oppressed over generations and generations, it finally takes hold. The oppression takes hold within you. Once it takes hold within you, it's perpetuated from within, and we act out the oppression on ourselves. We perpetuate the oppression on ourselves. This is how deeply it's been ingrained. So that passage is in honor of Catherine and the deep, deep wounds that so many people are still trying to heal. The second passage is in honor of my dear friend and another elder, tribal elder from Pine Ridge, Merola Spider, who prides herself in being a 4th generation storyteller from the district of Porcupine on the reservation. And she has a vision that is central to Lakota spirituality. And I wanted to share it with you. It's my wish for the future. I'm sitting in the basement of the Singing Horse Trading Post for the first time I ever met Merola. Merola gets up and walks towards the counter. She continues talking as she walks. We're all related, she says. Some of us, the old, the real fluent speakers, you might say the full-bloods, we still believe that we are all related. We try to teach that to our young children. When I'm teaching in the classroom, I try to teach them that no matter what color a person is, we don't see the color. We see the spirit of the person. And then we know that we are related, that we are all related. No matter where we come from, you always meet a person, and it seems like you knew him or her for a long, long time. You don't look at the color and where they came from, you just know that you're related in some way. That means a lot. There are a lot of us who still believe that way, who still believe in the old ways. A lot of times you hear people say, no, that's not the way, but those people probably have a little bit of doubt in themselves. There are still a few of us left who believe in the old ways, who believe that we're all related. My third wish or honor is for another elder at Pine Ridge and dear friend. His name's Jim Miller. And Jim carries the story of his people as so many other elders do. He was a combat frontline combatant in Vietnam, returned home with PTSD, had significant issues with alcohol, ended up in federal prison, and recovered. Had a vision a few years ago about 38 Dakota Sioux hanging in Minnesota, organized what is now the Dakota 38 Ride every year in honor of those who were hung in Mankato. And he sent me a text this afternoon. I was just with him a couple days ago in Pine Ridge. He said, and here's his text. He said, "Hey brother, I'm teaching myself how to text." I literally think this was his first text. And he's so proud. But this is what I love. "I prayed for your presentation. I know you did well. I love you, man." And what I love about Jim Miller is everywhere he goes, everybody he meets, regardless of the color, as soon as he shakes hands, he says, "I love you, man." And he has a vision that's his that gives me goosebumps because of the difficulty of the challenge. He says that we have to forgive. We have to forgive so that we can move forward. And then finally, quickly, my last I wanted to recognize is a young man from the Dominican by the name of Isaac. So because I'm from Maine and I travel some with business, I end up in Boston and New York a lot, and I end up in a taxi cab a lot. And I'm always interested in the driver. And the driver is almost always a young person from Africa or a young person from Central or South America or the Caribbean. And I always ask them the same question the old jewelry maker asked me: "What brings you here?" And the last taxi I was in, Isaac was driving from the Dominican. And what brought him here was the opportunity he saw in this country. He said, "The only way you can make money or have fame in my country is if you're leading the government. And here there's opportunity. It's not easy, you have to work hard, but there's opportunity." And it reminded me that all over the world, people fight and dig and scratch to get to this country. And one of my deepest wishes is that someday all of the first native peoples of this country could wake up and view their own country with that same type of fairness and optimism and opportunity. A big wish, but it's a wish I have. So I'd just like to end by saying I have a second name. It's Hoya Washte. And that name was given to me in Sweat Lodge in a making of relatives ceremony that says so much about the big heart of the Lakota people. The gentleman that made me his brother, it took me years to realize he really meant it. When he made me his brother, it was the equivalent of as if I was his blood. There was no difference. But I love the name because of what happened to my voice. Translated, it means he throws a good voice, or he throws his voice for good. And I'm just really honored to be here, to be a part of this group, and to have been a part of your community for a few days. So, Wopila Tomka, big thanks.
We're going to move on to the second part of the program where we'll put forth some questions and ask all three of our panelists to comment on them. And we've heard inklings of answers to these, and I want to ask them to elaborate. In hearing a call to justice, a call to liberation, or to honor the sacred things in your life, they happen in moments. It's almost like you have to catch them out of the corner of your eye. And I wanted Kevin to elaborate further. You know, when you talked about, one of the questions I asked him, if you couldn't have lost your voice, would this have happened? Answering a call like these is difficult, particularly for those of us who haven't been on Pine Ridge, or it didn't grow up at Standing Rock, or Sage. So I would like Kevin to talk about the moment, whether it's losing your voice, or whether that moment at National Geographic. And Phyllis, you shared a story in Dr. Huber's class the other day about marching and what the little girl said and how profound it was. I would like you to share that moment. Tink, you and I have been walking through the Union about the internal oppression that Kevin was reading, the colonization, and how hard it is for all of us to break through that. Nearly impossible, it seems. And I know that you've had those moments, and it's been a struggle to break through, and if you would talk about that moment. So I guess, Kevin, you start.
So I don't believe I believe my voice disorder was the great spirit and my soul's way of getting my attention, of getting me to stop and think and listen and change. And it's a little hard sometimes to talk about my voice when it's like right now it's actually pretty normal because I get a periodic Botox injection. Botox is a muscle relaxant, and sometimes it works and my voice can function, but often you would have a very difficult time hearing me. But what the lesson there to me was that partial loss of my voice, which I'd only for quite some time thought of as a problem or a disability or a hindrance, actually turned out to be one of the greatest blessings and callings and opportunities that ever came my way, and it came in disguise. And I've since said that if someone told me they could wind back the hands of time and take back my voice disorder, I wouldn't let them have it, because I learned so much more from losing the consistent use of my voice. It was a real blessing. And once I stopped and I sat still and I started listening more, I was better able to serve and help and collaborate with others. But I also started hearing in a deeper way the whispers of my own soul, and I've since come to believe that when you search that way, done the right way, that being selfish is selfless. For when you start doing those things that make you light up, that make you lose track of time, that make you you, that's when you become that light, that holy light that can give the most back to others. So the loss of my voice turned out to be quite a blessing.
So I was sharing my life work in that class, and I was at the Trail of Broken Treaties in 1972. We marched to Washington. I was part of Wounded Knee in 73, and I was also part of the longest walk to Washington, D.C., once again to seek justice for our rights. In 1974, I helped to coordinate the first conference, treaty conference in Standing Rock, and the chiefs mandated opening a UN office. So I moved to New York City, got mugged in Manhattan. So in sharing that, I helped to open an office across from the United Nations, and we received our NGO credentials in 3 years, and we coordinated the first conference on Indian people and our lands by 1977, and we began the work for 37 years to complete the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. I worked for 20 years, going back and forth, traveling the world to the world courts, studying their procedures, meeting with human rights activists. I actually had a very privileged life in knowing the human rights activists in the world. Two of my best friends, she was one who helped Anne Frank in Holland, she became a mentor, a relative, and the other one was from the family who tried to keep their Japanese help here in the United States to hide them, and faced treason charges, pleaded insanity, and was banished to live in Africa. So they created NGOs for the handicapped, for the less fortunate, and they really paved the way for human rights for the less fortunate. Those were my mentors. And going back and forth for 20 years was very busy. I also introduced my children to the World Court. One of my daughters sat in the Chief Justice seat and declared that we would all be free. So never leaving our family behind and trying to share and embrace and pursue and seek all the principles of human rights. And so doing all that work and then coming home and one day being told by one of the local families on Standing Rock, why are you going all over the world saving people all over when your own people are committing suicide? I stopped in my tracks in 1998 after 20 years, and I went home and I stayed there. And I was very involved in intervention for suicide among my own people. It was the hardest endeavor to try to talk about life and ask them to live, because only Tunkashila can decide the time that we have here, which is like a grain of sand when it comes to time. And so I took the youngest one, he was 10 years old. Later there was a younger girl who was 8, into my home, and I took care of him. And he wanted to be on the computer, he wanted to ride horse, he wanted to go to Wounded Knee, he wanted to go to Pine Ridge where all the real Indians live. And so we went there. And wherever I went, I asked the drum if they could give him a drumstick and help him sing. I took care of the oldest one who tried to commit suicide, and he shot himself in the face, and he was 76. And I gave him a harder time because he was a veteran in the Second World War, and I told him, "You're a tough old man. You need to toughen up for yourself. You have no right to take your life." "Okay, I'm sorry. I'll forgive myself. And you'll pray with me." So I fed him, and we prayed, and he lived out his life. And so Akisha, I did the honor